such as firewalls and IPSs. And that is unless they are specifically aware of Teredo and know to look for that content inside of UDP. And this means that some of these network controls aren't being applied. And those are there for a reason, right? Some important controls may not be in place on the end host. They were on the network only, but they weren't available or put into place on the end host. And in any case, even if there's analogous controls both on the end host and on the network, your defense in depth is being reduced. This is a basic security principle there. And you should be applying at least as strong of controls to Teredo tunnel packets as to IPv6. Okay, another major concern that sort of ties in with that the previous point is that inspecting all Teredo content, either for selective filtering or passive monitoring, that's not trivial, and that's because only the server-bound traffic in Teredo has a characteristic port, and that data isn't even the real data. That means you need to be looking at all UDP ports, all packets on all UDP ports. You need to apply a heuristic to find Teredo packets, and that's expensive as it might sound. And so this may mean in some situations it's just so expensive that you can't do security inspection. Some devices just may not do it just because it's too expensive. Think maybe routers or something. Although the situation for blocking just blocking Teredo entirely is more tractable. That's because blocking outbound port 3544 should eventually starve normal Teredo clients of their ability to connect. That's because it's blocking access to the server. That should work. The IETF seems to think it will. And I'd say eventually, because the effect isn't immediate. It only does that when the Teredo client needs to verify its Teredo address. So there may be a delay, and then it depends on whether the client insists on the server being still available. Although this won't, of course, prevent any kind of intentionally evasive type of behavior, but that's a hard problem to start with. Given these concerns about the selective filtering, this has recently seemed to motivate the V6 operations working group towards consensus that Teredo should not be used on a managed network. The latest version of the internet draft that I initiated says that Teredo is not recommended as a solution for managed networks. Of course, there's an internet draft work in progress. So that may not be the final language, but I expect that it will be. More poignantly, Christian Huitma, who's the author of Teredo, says that if an organization wants to provide IPv6 connectivity while monitoring IPv6 traffic, then Teredo is definitely not the right tool. So in other words, what organization doesn't want to monitor their IPv6 content? They say he says the best way to achieve this is by providing native IPv6, or at least using something like ISATAP instead. This was in a response to the V6 operations mailing list. There is some positive things from Teredo, in that the RFC does require a lot of sanity checking on packets that come in or are going out. Making sure that there's no encoded broadcast address, for example, inside the Teredo address. And that does prevent a number of attacks. And we verified that Teredo does at least some of these sanity checks. With Teredo, you can use IPsec in a normal manner, unlike with 6-4. And Teredo also specifies some decent anti-spoofing mechanisms to be used, such as the ping test. But watch out for a couple slides, though. And this is beneficial for when IPsec isn't being used for whatever reason. Now, how does this tie in for Vista? Is that Vista, at least as of release candidate 2, the nonce that's used for this ping test is only 32 bits long, whereas Microsoft's own RFC suggests that it'd be at least 64 bits. Don't ask me. I don't know. Also, sometimes 0 is used as this nonce instead of some random number, which we haven't dug into and we don't understand. Because 0 could be a random number, right? Yeah, you can't prove otherwise, right? Another concern is, that the server knows all the peer IPv6 addresses. That's because it helps with the ping test, and that's fine if you trust that the server is not going to make any kind of bad use of this information. And did I mention that in XP and in Vista, by default, Microsoft servers are being used? Any conspiracy theorists out there? No, I'm just kidding. I think we can trust Microsoft on this, right? Yeah, another concern is what we call Teredo, the server bumping. The question there is, what happens if malware or some malicious user changes the setting for what Teredo server should be used?
Don't they own that server in that case?
Sorry?
Don't they own the server if they can do that? They just change your operating system. Just prove.
Yeah, but yes. Yeah, but assuming that somehow they do that, and they want to be subtle about it. Assuming this new server functions mostly properly, the user is unlikely to notice just because it's transparent. The new server could be malicious, and it could snoop what all your peer hosts are. There might be something interesting to like a jealous spouse or something. But it gets worse. If you ask a malicious Teredo server to help you find a relay for an IPv6 peer, which is what you normally do for any new destination IPv6 address, the server could lie and say that it is the relay to use, or it could pass it along. It could have a friend's Teredo server respond and say that it is the friend's Teredo relay, respond and say that it is the relay to use. And so there's various uses in this in fishing and farming. There just is another way to do farming. How much of this is a concern in the real world? It depends if the client prefers Teredo over a native IPv4 address. But there's the potential, depending on the behavior, for the server to spoof all IPv6 capable servers on the internet. And as a sign for Vista in particular, the good thing is that you do need administrator privileges to change the Teredo server setting. And administrator is definitely a lot less prevalent than in XP. And although if you do try to read the Teredo server setting as a non-administrator, it'll always say that Teredo, that IPv6.microsoft.com is being used, regardless of the actual server setting, which is just kind of a quirk, perhaps having to do with the virtualization of DLLs or whatever. We haven't looked into exactly why it does this, but the implication is that it makes it easier to bump a easier to miss a bump server. So always do this check as an administrator. Do the run as administrator when you open up NetShell. It also say that Teredo is always not being used as well. My suggestions is that due to these security implications, we found for managed networks, I recommend disable Teredo and block it on your network. Upgrade your security controls and postures to support native IPv6, and only then obtain an IPv6 connection, a native one, to the internet. And there's no way I have time for LTD here. You can, if you look at the slides, which I think it will be available, it's present there. Okay. Okay, so in conclusion, beware of Teredo tunneling through your network. It may be imitating what the namesake mollusk does. See what you need to do as a result of these networking changes in Vista. And you can read our reports for more details. They're on the conference CD and on the web. Okay, at this point, I have 4 minutes for questions, I believe. Yes?
Yeah, isn't it true that a server on the host has to take special action to accept Teredo traffic?
Server on a host.
The attack surface on the host is actually fairly limited because the service on the host has to opt in Teredo traffic.
The Teredo, well, it's up to the Teredo client, and in Vista, the Teredo client is enabled by default.
No, yes, you said the client itself could be exposing itself to attack. This would be potentially accepting Teredo traffic, which would traverse the firewall. The fact is the servers on that host have to opt in and eventually say, I want to accept Teredo traffic. And so that's
The server? Well, that means
pop open and find the socket, an IPv6 socket by default. I'm not going to get Teredo traffic on that socket.
if you have native access to IPv6, no, but in general, if you just create a socket, the client will be transparent to you whether Teredo is being used, at least on Vista.
Hopefully that's true.
Okay, you might be right. I don't know. Other questions? Okay. Any other questions? You can talk to me in the hall. Thanks for attending this presentation.